This week on CrunchWeek, we're talking about Samsung's new smartwatch, Microsoft's $7.2 billion buy of Nokia, and Braintree is on the block. Welcome to CrunchWeek. I'm Lena Rao.
I'm Greg Comparek.
And I'm Jordan Crook.
This was a pretty news-filled week, I'd say.
Yeah. Summer is over.
Summer is over, that's
Seriously.
right, with a bang. So, big news from Samsung this week, two devices, right? The Note, and then also really the one that was hyped up the most, which was the smartwatch, like one of the first smartwatches that's out there. What do you guys, we've got our gadget folks here, so I'm pretty excited about this.
It's definitely not the first smartwatch. It's kind of the first smartwatch now that people are caring about smartwatches. It's the first really hyped up smartwatch that had a bunch of leaks. And
Yeah.
Well, and it's the first one that comes from a major brand. I mean, we've had like Pebble
right.
and you know, obviously there's the
I
Win.
mean, Microsoft has made smartwatches before, and Sony made smartwatches before. It's just that it was before anybody really cared, and they were super limited.
Right. This is like the first real full-featured. It has processing power. It's got a really nice screen. It does everything that you could really want from a smartwatch. It's even got a little camera in there. So I mean,
Jeez.
But it's sort of hard to tell really like what the market's going to be, because a lot of the other rumored entrants like Apple haven't gotten in there yet, right? Like, what do you think, you know, is it tough to kind of predict how successful Samsung will be at this point?
well, I think also you have to consider that like with the Galaxy Gear, particularly you have to use a certain device. So the Note 3 pairs with it, the brand new phone that they launched, and maybe a couple other Galaxy devices. I'm not quite sure, but
yeah, and an update coming in a couple of months is going to add support for some of Samsung's other really popular ones like the
Galaxy S3.
Galaxy S4, Galaxy S3, and all those. But that's a couple months down the road.
So I think that the idea here is that like if I have an iPhone, no matter how much I want a smartwatch, it's not just the $300 investment in the smartwatch, it's then another phone and a new platform. And that's asking a lot of people. I think that's why Samsung tried to push it out before Apple, though, because they might be able to pull a few people that way. But I think that lack of compatibility with other platforms is more makes it a perk to owning a Galaxy phone, as opposed to I have to have a Galaxy phone now because I want this watch. I mean, we'll see how people feel. That's where I land.
I mean, you have to assume that if the rumors are true and Apple is actually working on a smartwatch of their own, that's probably only going to work, or at least fully work, with iOS and with iPhones.
Right.
So it's going to be the same thing for them, most likely. But the difference is that with Android, because there's so many different phones and so many different things all under this Android ecosphere, this Android umbrella, it's going to be kind of tough to sell to the Android crowd. Like, yeah, it works with Android, but just these phones.
Right.
Whereas with the iPhone and with Apple, it's like you have an iPhone, it'll work.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's largely because Apple has control of their hardware and their software and everything.
And I think the design here is pretty nice. I mean, the screen looks good, and they've got all these different color bands, and that's all well and good. But Apple is known for its design prowess. I think that's something that you wear on your body. You really put a lot more focus and attention onto what those things look like and the design there. Same thing with Google Glass. That'll be an issue there, whether or not people like, fashionistas are going to wear Google Glass. There's a question there.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I'm
have
saying?
to say, like, from someone who pays attention to fashion, I didn't really like the look of the
Vogue?
I didn't like the look of the smartwatch. Like, I don't think that I would wear that. And maybe there'll be more developments coming out that adhere to, like, the aesthetic of it, but I'm hopeful that Apple will bring, when they do eventually launch something, that it will be more fashion forward.
You can only hope.
The one thing about Samsung is that even if it's not like a smash success, it doesn't have to be. It's Samsung.
They build things every day.
Yeah, they've probably got 60 other prototypes that they can release next week of a smartwatch. It's just kind of what they do as a company. So whereas Apple's going to put all their weight behind one smartwatch for at least a year, Samsung can reiterate within 3 months on the next thing. So.
Absolutely.
Well, in other news in the hardware world, Microsoft bought Nokia, cell phone manufacturer.
What is it called?
Devices and services.
Devices and services,
there we go.
yeah, for $7.2 billion, which is like, it's almost like Steve Ballmer's like, last sort of big hurrah, like, let's just buy Nokia. What do you guys?
Making it rain on the way out the door.
Yeah, that's right. What do you guys think? Was it good? I mean, there's a lot of controversy around this. Some people have said it's terrible. Some people have said it's actually a good thing.
I think it's a good move, but Microsoft actually needs Nokia for a lot of reasons that people are kind of forgetting about. So beyond the devices and services that they acquired, they need Nokia to continue to exist because of amongst other things like Navtech. Nokia bought Navtech a couple of years ago for $8 billion. And Nokia didn't sell the Navtech's mapping systems to Microsoft as part of it, but Navtech's maps power Bing Maps and all of the maps on all of Microsoft's Windows Phone. And if that just disappeared overnight, if Nokia went under, Microsoft would be pretty screwed because making maps is hard, as Apple learned very hard.
They need each other, I think, and that's pretty clear. Nokia needs a cash infusion. They need a papa. They need someone to stand on the shoulders of. You know what I mean? And vice versa. Like you said, Microsoft does need things from Nokia. The question is, like, you know, in this ecosystem, especially when it comes to mobile hardware, you have iOS and Android leading the pack in a lot of ways, and then down there at the bottom is Windows Phone. And the question is, these are two kind of grandpas in the space. Like Nokia was awesome 15 years ago, 10 years ago. It was the phone that you had. And Microsoft, the same thing. Like Microsoft isn't dead, that's for sure. But Microsoft is becoming like the old guy in the Apple commercial. You know what I mean?
They're like replacing BlackBerry, basically.
So how did those two people partner and become cool again? That's the question.
Right.
And I think that I'm a huge proponent of Windows Phone getting bigger. I think that there needs to be more competition in the space. And I think Windows Phone, the way that it integrates with Windows 8 and all of that is really, really great. It's just a matter of can they execute, I think.
So like my question is, you know, there's a lot of talk about how, you know, Apple, because it controls it, you know, they make the device, they're a manufacturer, and they develop the OS. Like that's one of the reasons why they're, you know, everything's designed so well, everything works so well. And then that was the talk about when Google bought Motorola, that was sort of their aim. Do you see this playing out the same way, and do you see it being a successful outcome for them?
I actually see other manufacturers besides Microsoft and Nokia maybe moving away from making Windows phones for a while. Because like when you look at when Google bought Motorola, Google came out and they said, you know what, we're not going to give them any advantages, and we're going to try and, you know, release things to everybody at the same time. Whereas with Microsoft and Nokia, there's not as much of a reason for anybody. Like no one else has really gone deep with Windows Phone as is, and now there's not really that much of a reason to do so. Let Microsoft and Nokia kind of do their own thing, release their own hardware, release their own phones, and figure out what they really want to do with Windows phones, and then maybe pick it back up in a couple months or a year.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if anything, it can only do good things for Nokia and for Microsoft, for Windows Phone, you know, generally, because you've got these two kind of powerhouses working together finally. Nokia's always been, you know, pretty good at hardware, not so much with the software. I've never really liked any of Nokia's own operating systems. Windows Phone is pretty slick. I think that, you know, getting them together and really focusing in on the relationship between the hardware and the software will just make them better phones generally. So.
Well, and another thing that people have been talking about is also that the Stephen Elop, the CEO of Nokia, could end up replacing Ballmer. So what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's a possibility? Would he be a good person to then sort of lead Microsoft into this new era?
Elop was
post-Ballmer era?
the first non-Finnish CEO of Nokia for ever. So he kind of already has roots here, I guess, and with Microsoft in some way. I think that I don't know how he would run Microsoft. I know with Nokia he's really, really focused on consumer perception of Nokia, and obviously that has to do with the fact that Nokia has declined over the years. But I think that marketing is going to play a big role, and I think that he understands that to a degree. The Nokia ads that I've seen have been better than the ones in the past, although not great. So, I mean, we'll just see. What do you think?
I agree.
Do you have any sort of...
Cool. Nailed it.
Besides Elop, is there anyone else who you think whose hat is like definitely in the ring to replace Ballmer in the future?
I don't know if his hat's in the ring or if he's being considered, but I've always liked Joe Belfiore. That's how you say it, right? He runs Windows Phone, and he's young, but he's got a good head on his shoulders, it seems like, and he's really good in front of crowds. Every time I've seen him present or do videos or whatever he does that kind of speaks directly to consumers, you understand where he's coming from and what he's going for. So I always thought he was cool. I don't really know past that.
Yeah.
Anyone from your side?
To be honest, I don't want to make a prediction just because I feel like Ballmer's departure, his exit might have been a little bit more sudden than they really let on. So I think that the board at Microsoft even might be a little bit like, who are we going to get? who are we going to pick? So I think.
Well, I'm still voting for Aaron Levy, the CEO of Fox. 'Cause I think that would just be amazing. On to our last bit of news. Myself and my colleague Sarah Perez broke some news yesterday about how payments gateway Braintree was in pretty advanced stage acquisition talks with Square, and they were asking apparently for $1 billion, which seems to be like the number du jour for acquisitions across the board these days. But apparently the acquisition talks went awry, and they're not in place anymore. But also PayPal has been eyeing the company and have been considering acquiring them. So apparently the company's on the block, and there's going to be some consolidation in the payments world soon. So it should be interesting.
Why
to see what
would
happens.
Square want Braintree? Explain the motivations behind
Well,
these.
it's a payments gateway, so it does provide easier payments on the back end, and so they could then provide those services to some of their vendors, but also it gives them an online payments. Like when they are working with merchants in store, they can offer them like an in-store and an online availability,
Wow.
which is, pretty big deal, I'd say.
Especially for those small
if they're
businesses.
looking to expand their business. But $1 billion is a lot of money. I'm not sure if Square, certainly Square's raised a lot of money. I don't know at this point. I haven't seen their financials, but there is a wonder if Square could afford that at $1 billion. And also you have to think about, what is Braintree worth with the right partner? Is it worth $1 billion? Some people say maybe, but it has to be the right fit.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, we are going to wrap up our show for this week, but we are throwing off to Disrupt. Please watch all of our coverage over the next few weeks, and we'll be joining you for CrunchWeek in another week. Thanks so much.